Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today, we are going to place one of the most fascinating and deeply human scenes in international politics, beneath a microscope. History repeatedly presents us with leaders who appear invincible within the borders of their own countries. Behind the doors of government buildings, they strike the table with confidence, issue commands without hesitation, and expect unquestioning obedience from everyone around them. Armed with legal authority, political influence, and institutional power, they project the image of absolute control. Within their own political ecosystem, they appear fearless. They seem to stand at the center of their universe. Yet something remarkable happens. The moment the stage expands beyond national borders, the setting changes from a familiar office to the grand halls of international summits, places such as G7 or G20 meetings, where reputation, trust, credibility, and national interest intersect. Under the unforgiving spotlight of global diplomacy, suddenly the atmosphere changes. The applause disappears. The carefully managed image begins to fade. No one automatically acknowledges their authority. No one is obligated to treat them as the most important person in the room. In that moment, a leader encounters perhaps the most terrifying experience imaginable, confronting the distance between the image they have constructed and the person they truly are. This is not merely a question of diplomatic skill or protocol. From the perspective of political psychology, it is a story about the fragile relationship between power and identity. From the perspective of international relations, it is about trust, reputation, and political legitimacy. From the perspective of Eastern philosophy, it reflects an ancient conflict between illusion, reality, a struggle that has occupied philosophers and spiritual traditions for thousands of years. Today's lecture explores this phenomenon through three essential questions. Why do some leaders appear completely different at home than they do abroad? What psychological transformations occur when a person suddenly experiences social isolation on the international stage? And perhaps the most difficult question of all, can human beings ever fully recognize the limits of their own ego before it is too late? Before we begin, it is important to clarify the purpose of this discussion. This lecture does not target any particular politician, government, or current political controversy. Instead, it is an exploration of the universal mechanisms of power, psychology, and leadership through the lenses of political psychology, criminology, and classical Eastern philosophy. The examples discussed here should be understood as symbolic rather than personal. Our purpose is not political criticism, but philosophical inquiry into one of humanity's oldest temptations, the intoxicating nature of power. Imagine a ruler who roars like a lion inside the walls of his own nation. He pounds the desk. He commands advisors without opposition. He controls appointments. He influences legal institutions. He shapes public narratives. Within his own territory, he appears almost godlike. His confidence seems limitless because everyone around him already knows the rules of the game. Fear reinforces authority. Dependency reinforces loyalty. Power reinforces itself. But then the scene changes. He is invited into the vast banquet hall of international politics, a place occupied by presidents, prime ministers, kings, diplomats, generals, economists, and leaders from around the world. This is not his kingdom. This is a marketplace of influence where respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned. In these enormous conference halls, something extraordinary often becomes visible. There sits a leader who only days earlier dominated every domestic headline. Now he stands quietly in the corner. Few approach him. Few initiate conversation. Some barely acknowledge his presence. Surrounded by brilliant lights, expensive suits, and ceremonial elegance, he appears strangely, frozen, looking straight ahead while the world moves around him. Many people interpret such moments as diplomatic incompetence or awkward protocol. I believe they reveal something much deeper. Psychologically, they may resemble what some clinicians describe as narcissistic dissociation, a painful separation between the grandiose, self-image, and external reality. From a criminological perspective, They resemble a form of symbolic social execution, where an individual's social status is not destroyed through violence, but through collective exclusion. Spiritually, the scene bears an uncanny resemblance to the teachings of the ancient Tibetan text, commonly known as the Bardo Thodol, or the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The text describes an intermediate state, the Bardo, existing between death and rebirth, where individuals confront realities that can no longer be hidden behind familiar identities. Whether one accepts these spiritual ideas, literally or metaphorically, the symbolism is striking. Powerful illusions can disappear much faster than power itself. Throughout this lecture, we will use the symbolic expression, a leader contaminated by radiation. The phrase is metaphorical. Radiation is invisible. Its effects accumulate gradually. Those exposed to it often remain unaware until serious damage has already occurred. Power can function in much the same way. When leaders spend years surrounded only by applause, obedience, and carefully managed information, they may gradually become psychologically contaminated by their own authority. They begin believing the image reflected back to them. They mistake institutional control for genuine respect. They confuse fear with admiration. They confuse silence with loyalty. Eventually, they become unable to distinguish reality from the echo chamber they have created. That invisible contamination may prove far more dangerous than any external enemy. This lecture is therefore not a political attack. It is a psychological autopsy. It examines how absolute power can intoxicate the human mind, and how that intoxication eventually collides with reality. Part 1. What is radiation contamination in political leadership? Why does the tiger at home become a ghost at the international banquet? Let us begin with the perspective of international political psychology. International summit banquets are not simply formal dinners. They function as marketplaces, where political capital is constantly being evaluated. Every handshake carries symbolic value. Every photograph communicates political legitimacy. Every informal conversation sends signals to governments, financial markets, allies, and domestic voters. At these gatherings, national interests are negotiated, not only through official speeches, but also through subtle social interactions. In this environment, a leader's moral credibility, diplomatic reliability, military influence, economic strength, and personal reputation all become part of a continuous global assessment. Consequently, when a leader finds himself consistently isolated during such events, the message extends far beyond simple etiquette. It may indicate that other governments perceive him as politically costly to associate with. Political psychology refers to reputation as one of the most valuable currencies in international relations. Trust requires years to build. It can disappear almost overnight. When international confidence erodes, leaders may gradually become viewed as diplomatic liabilities rather than strategic partners. One might compare this to how financial markets treat toxic assets. Investors avoid them because association itself creates risk. Similarly, world leaders often calculate whether public displays of friendship, photographs, or extended conversations might damage their own political standing at home. A single widely circulated image can influence public opinion, parliamentary debate, media narratives, or future diplomatic negotiations. As a result, decisions that appear personal are often highly strategic. The silence itself becomes communication. The distance itself becomes policy. Some scholars describe this phenomenon as strategic omission, the deliberate choice to reduce public engagement in order to avoid conferring political legitimacy upon another leader. Unlike military sanctions or economic embargoes, strategic omission operates quietly. No formal announcement is made. No public accusation is necessary. Isolation itself communicates the message. Sometimes the loudest statement in diplomacy is not what is said. It is who chooses not to stand beside you. In the next part of this lecture, we will move beyond international relations and examine this phenomenon through the lens of criminal psychology. We will explore why individuals who appear overwhelmingly powerful within controlled environments often become psychologically vulnerable. the moment those systems of coercion disappear, revealing the fragile emotional foundations hidden beneath authoritarian confidence.